Thank you so much for joining us today. We are talking about the fourth trimester supported in honor of Maternal Health Awareness Day, which was yesterday. Maternal Health Awareness Day was started in 2017 by the Black Mamas Matter Alliance, and it was really created to highlight the gaps in maternal care and address disparities, uplift community-based solutions, and improve outcomes for birthing people. And I am so excited today to be talking specifically about postpartum because this, I think, is an area that often gets overlooked in the conversation. It is only one aspect, of course, of maternal health, and we are just really excited to be addressing it today. I am joined by Jen Cowell and Jean Marie Marabella. I will let each of you introduce yourselves as well, but I am Caitlin Undreiner. I own Bloom Baby Doulas. We are a full spectrum doula referral agency serving New Jersey and the New York metro area, and we really focus on supporting families throughout the whole spectrum of reproductive health and all of the transitions that go with that, whether it be supporting pregnancy, birth, postpartum, bereavement. We have an amazing team of doulas that support families directly. We have an incredible referral network made up of care providers, and Jean Marie and Jen are part of that incredible network. And we really focus on these concentric layers of support, not just supporting families, but also supporting the providers so that we are all resourced to show up in these spaces and provide the best care possible. So Jean Marie and Jen, if you would like to introduce yourselves before we start the conversation, that would be amazing.
Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Caitlin. Hi, Jean Marie. So I'm Jen Cowell. I am a board-certified lactation consultant and a retired birth and postpartum doula. So I bring a lot of that to the table as a lactation and breastfeeding support person. I own Milkwell Lactation and Feeding Solutions, and we are a feeding inclusive lactation consulting practice. So however you are choosing to feed your baby, or however the families are choosing, the families that you as doulas are supporting are choosing to feed their babies, we are on your side. If you are nursing your baby exclusively, if you are hybrid feeding your baby breast milk and formula milk, if you are exclusively feeding your baby formula milk, we are on your side. We got you. Our biggest platform is maternal mental health. Like everything we do at Milkwell is run through the lens of how do we support mom's mental health? How do we support the mental health of the entire family, the baby's growing emotional, developmental mental health as well? And we also believe in mentoring the next generation of lactation professionals. And so similar to how Caitlin's practice is supporting the community and professionals, we're doing the same thing at Milkwell. So we bring in student IBCLCs and we help them get their clinical hours so that they can sit for their board exams. And we also offer group mentorship programs for people who aren't looking to get their IBCLC. We offer breastfeeding for doulas classes and, too many workshops and classes to name for both parents and professionals. So it's a little bit about what we're doing at Milkwell.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was a really wonderful way to segue to where I talk about. So I'm here to talk specifically about mental health. But the whole point of the collaborative approach that we're talking about is you can't do one thing. You can't do prevention without doing treatment. You can't do mental health without doing physical health, the mind and the body and the baby. And they're all just part of the one great big thing. And the system of which, by the way, that's us. So if you're saying, well, the system, blah, 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 that's us. That's what I'm going to talk about is our part in the system of care delivery and the mental health aspect of that from a mental health perspective. But you can't consider mental health without considering how the baby's eating. You can't consider, like, all of these things go together. So who am I? I'm a counselor. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've had a private practice for decades. Before that, I did a lot of nonprofit work, mostly built around AIDS and HIV and prevention work in that area. Currently, my practice is what I like to call from one end of life to the other and all points in between. So I do birth work. I also do end of life work, and then the really unfortunate place where those two things overlap, where birth and end of life happen at the same time. In terms of my place in this room, I'm also trained as a doula and a lactation counselor, and also a postpartum doula. And I have served in those roles, but I don't work professionally in those roles. They inform what I do, and this informs my work when I do there. And I work with several other birth professionals. So if there's someone who has difficulty or struggles, then I will work with the doula, or I will work with the midwife, or I will work with whomever to consult or to provide one service while they're providing the other. I don't provide mental health services and then attend a birth. That's just something I don't do. I know other people do that. But we work it all out. We find a way to figure out what the person needs and help them. And that's really what today is about. How are we each a part of this system to figure out what the people need and then help them out?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so the conversation today really is focused on that fourth trimester. And if you're not familiar with that term, we're really talking about those first months after birth that are still very much part of this tender time, this major adjustment and transition for families. And as Jean Marie said, that encompasses so many aspects of care and who we are. Those transitions are not just happening in the physical realm. They're not just happening in the emotional realm. They're happening in our relationships and how we take care of ourselves and others, how we relate with our partner and our other children and our family and our friends and work in our home. And every aspect of life is affected by these major transitions. And I think it's very often talked about with first-time parents, how this is like such a shock, such an adjustment, but it happens every single time. Whether it's your first baby or your fifth baby, you are still going through a major life transition. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just really important to keep that in mind as this, in the same way that you're moving through each pregnancy individually, and each pregnancy is going to be unique, each birth is going to be unique. Same for postpartum. Every time it happens, it's going to be a brand new set of challenges, brand new set of joys, brand new set of adjustments. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we have this discussion, that this is not just for supporting first-time parents. This is not just for supporting birthing parents. It can be adoption, it can be foster parents, it can be someone coming into this moment of transition in a lot of different ways. That it's going to be applicable. And I think sometimes with that birth into postpartum conversation, we're thinking mostly about the physical body and these transitions of the physical body. But this postpartum work that we're talking about today really does apply to families, even who have not physically birthed themselves. They still need support in the mental health arenas, in the feeding, in the adjustment to family dynamics. All of that comes into play. And the other piece that I really want to talk about today is I think that often this part of support or care gets framed as a luxury. I hear a lot of grandparents saying, well, I did it on my own and I was just fine. I got through it. And what I hear when I hear people say that, what I hear behind it is a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, a lot of like, I got through. It's like a badge of honor, right? And yes, you got through, and that's amazing. Like, I'm so glad that you are here and you got through that. But we don't have to just struggle through these major transitions. We can thrive through these major transitions. And we don't have to think of asking for support as a luxury or a weakness or a shortcoming. And Jen and I have had this conversation many times over the years, but the idea of people commingling the concepts of what they are capable of and what they have the capacity for. And in these transitions in life, whether it be, birthing and postpartum, whether it be other life transitions like Jean Marie supports, there are these moments where we have less capacity. It does not in any way diminish what we are capable of, but we have less capacity to pull out those tools or those pieces of who we are or express things in a particular way. And I think very often when parents see the diminishment of their capacity, they instead internalize it or make it into this narrative of, I am less capable. I'm not a good parent. I'm not showing up in these ways. What is wrong with me? Why do I have to ask for help? So I really want to start this conversation from that place of understanding this is not about what you are capable of. This is about what you currently in this moment have the capacity for, and how can we resource you so that you can regain more capacity or delegate things you do not have capacity for. Because this is simply where you are in this moment. It is no judgment needed, especially not that self-judgment. We really have to just be honest with where we are, what we need, and step into the spaces from the conversation in that way. So I would love to start with that. Where do each of you see that parents are the most unprepared after birth? What is it that you hear parents coming in and saying, I wish someone had told me, I wish I had known, like, why didn't I know this before? What feels like the most common piece? And Jen and Jean Marie, if you can each speak to that, like, what is the thing that you hear that the parents are feeling most unprepared for after birth?
Sure. I love what you shared about not having the capacity for something doesn't mean that we aren't capable of doing something. And I think when we look at how can we put systems in place and create structure in order to support our capacity, I think a missing component is what's going on systemically in our birthing spaces and in our care providers and just in our society at large that makes it okay that we don't have capacity. The fact that we're showing up at our births and right after our births with trauma means that our capacity is already going to be diminished going into the postpartum period. I don't even mean like emotional complications. I just mean like going into that post-birth era is going to feel difficult because of just the way birth is right now. And it's not whole woman centric, and it's not looking out for people's mental health, and it's not looking out for optimal feeding, even though we might say we are. So it's tough because, as a retired doula, I used to teach creation of a birth plan. I used to teach creation of a breastfeeding plan. I used to teach how do we create, how do we find classes to learn about breastfeeding and baby care and all this ahead of time in order to kind of like decrease that learning curve a little bit. But what's happening now is I'm seeing that that's like the icing on the cake. The cake is really like, how do we make sure that we're going into postpartum with calm, regulated nervous systems? How do we make sure that we're going into postpartum able to handle the things that are thrown at us, all of the overwhelm, on top of recovering from the overwhelm of birth, recovering from the overwhelm of whatever was going on during pregnancy. And so it's just like this gate of transition, followed by another gate of transition without any plateauing anywhere. So I find so many people are coming into the breastfeeding space, not just feeling like I don't have, I'm struggling, so I don't have the capability, but I don't have the capacity either, because they're literally just, they haven't had a chance to exhale. Everything has just been thrown at them. So, when we think about postpartum, and if we're lucky enough to be in the kind of these spaces where we start talking about postpartum and community building, I wish people also understood when it came to breastfeeding, that breastfeeding one baby takes a whole community.
Mm-hmm.
Just to feed one baby takes a whole community of personal support for the mom, professional support for the mom, And for the baby as well, the personal support for the baby is the baby's family. The professional support for the baby might be a whole team of providers, not just a pediatrician. It might be a lactation consultant. It might be the doula and a physical therapist. It might be a lot of different providers for everyone in the family. It takes a whole community to feed one baby. And I have a list of things that I wish more people knew, but I think I'm going to pause right there and just see what else is coming up for others for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback off of what both of you said. The idea of capacity is a really interesting one. And I use a metaphor, which is so perfect today, because the metaphor that I use is a blizzard. Even if it's July and I'm explaining this, I use the metaphor of a blizzard. So the blizzard is coming. The snow is coming.
Mm.
Snow doesn't have to be a crisis, right? A crisis isn't a thing that happens. It's when we don't have the tools in our toolbox to handle the thing that happens. So the blizzard is coming. We have salt, we have shovels, we have food to cook on top of the stove, and then we are less in crisis. And from the perspective of having a baby, what do people not expect, and they wish they knew, is that it's not a crisis, but it's a lot of things that change.
Mm-hmm.
The stress scale, and there's a list. Do this research, there's a list, and all the things on that list, with the exception of about 4, have to do with change. Change is stressful. Positive change, buying a new house, selling a house, stressful. Getting a job, losing a job, stressful. Having a baby, stressful. Birth, death, marriage, divorce, change is stressful. And I think the thing that people are surprised by is that everything changes.
Mm-hmm.
There's another human living in your house, and everything changes, especially with first births. Everything changes. And sometimes the tools in your toolbox just aren't there. And sometimes you're so overwhelmed, and this goes to the point of capacity, right? You're so overwhelmed, you forget about the tools. The toolbox is locked. The metaphorical box is locked, right? And sometimes the support you need is access to your toolbox or a remote. Sometimes you just need new tools. And not to be funny, but we are the tools, right? So I'm a tool and you're a tool. We're all tools. Other thing that I want to talk about besides the blizzard and preparing for it is the old concept, and I changed this about 10 years ago, the old concept of when you are in an airplane and the oxygen mask falls down, we've all heard this, you have to put the mask on yourself before you have the person next to you so that you can help the person. And the way I have changed this for clients, and especially for new parents, is the oxygen mask falls down and you have to put the oxygen mask on so you can breathe. The goal,
not helping somebody else.
Nice to be able to help someone else. An advantage of that is that we can help someone else, but not just with birth, in life. If an oxygen mask falls down, you put it on so you can breathe. And I think when you're a parent, we forget that we're a person, right? And then people don't even ask how we are. That's a whole other issue that we're going to talk about, right? There's no postpartum built-in appointments at 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months for the mom, but they're there for the child, right? All of a sudden, no one even asks how you are. How's the baby? How's the baby eating? How's the baby sleeping? Very few people outside of the field focus on the mom. And so the oxygen mask metaphor really comes in handy because our job is to help her to breathe. To breathe. Literally and metaphorically. So that's my approach to what you were asking about and what people would know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would love to just also focus one more question before we get into more of the aspect of what each of you do. Or I guess this will be our intro into how each of you work with families uniquely. What does real meaningful postpartum support look like in your particular practice, in your field? Like, what are the practical pieces as we're talking about this idea of people preparing for these changes that are coming and kind of knowing what it is. I think it's so helpful. I often help clients reframe so that we have realistic expectations ahead of time, right? So looking at how does your practice approach supporting in the postpartum? What are these practical pieces that people should have realistic expectations for and know ahead of time? For me, as a postpartum doula, I find that parents often don't understand that piece that Jean Marie was speaking of, that it changes everything. They're like, oh, I'm going to bring the baby home and I'll still walk the dog and I'll still clean the house and I'll still do my work and I'll still do all of these things, but there will be a baby here. And it's like, let's talk about it. So I feel like I get to do the overview of helping people understand how everything is going to shift and making a practical plan for the various aspects of that. And then also resourcing by bringing in this network of community support. And obviously, Jen and Jean Marie, you have unique areas that you are more focused on in that. And so as clients are coming to you for specific support, I would love for you to speak of, like, what is that specific support that you are able to offer? And of course, knowing, as we've already named, each of us is trained in many modalities and we wear a particular hat in this moment, and yet we are each incorporating and bringing in various aspects of our other training and our other work that informs how we're stepping into this space. So I guess the question for you, Jen, is specifically in this moment as a lactation consultant, what are the practical pieces? And then Jean Marie, for you as a therapist, what are those practical pieces that what does it look like for postpartum support?
Right. I feel like that was directed at me, that I can like go off on a tangent. I mean, are we talking practical like breast pads, or are we talking practical like understanding that breastfeeding is sometimes not just a choice? Right. So I can talk about this story I had. When I ran a breastfeeding support group about a decade ago, a mom came up to me. She'd been with us for a few weeks, and it was really beautiful to see her shift over a few weeks and start to feel more comfortable and living in her body a little bit more. And she's a medical professional herself. She works in women's health. She understood, or so she thought, what she was getting herself into. And she came to me and she's like, I thought breastfeeding was a choice. I thought I was going to choose to breastfeed or choose to bottle feed or formula feed. And I didn't realize how many variables there are in that. And that breastfeeding sometimes is more than a choice. It's like the first choice. And then there are a load of choices that you have to make after that. And I think that's actually a really, really practical thing that we talk about and that we create lots of conversation around in our prenatal consults, in our breastfeeding classes, in our postpartum consults, is that we have lots of choices. And you just choosing to want to breastfeed is just the first step. You choosing to be in our class or be in our office is just the first step. There are so many choices that come after this. Like understanding that breastfeeding is hard and easy at the same time. Right. So I hear so many people, I just want to breastfeed because I hear that pumping and the bottle feeding and the cleaning and the sterilizing and all of it, and shrugging, taking it around with me. Like, it's so hard. I just want to breastfeed it. Just whip it out. Like, it's going to be easy. And forgetting that learning any new thing is hard. Learning that any new thing, like the emotion that goes with learning, like this is evidence-based, the emotion that goes with learning something is frustration. Right. And so when we are holding our sweet, brand new little baby, and we are feeling that deep heart and that deep belly desire to want to be that baby's everything and provide everything you want to provide for that baby, while simultaneously holding that frustration that comes with learning how to do a new thing, it causes some really weird connections in the brain when we are like looking so endearingly at our little ones and then feeling so frustrated that breastfeeding may not be going the way we wish it were going. So understanding that it's hard and easy at the same time, that learning any new thing is hard and frustrating for a minute. And I think in large part it comes from the fact that we are bringing our whole selves, we're bringing our whole history to the breastfeeding table. Um, every part of us, physical, emotional, mental, relational, our history, our relationship with our moms, how we were cared for as children, and how that evolved into adult, like all kinds of stuff comes up when we are breastfeeding. And I really think, as important as it is to teach the basics of good breastfeeding prenatally, so that that part of the learning at least has a place to sit in the back of our brains when we're holding our babies for the first time, I really think the practical stuff is thinking about all the other relational things that happen around breastfeeding, because that's where I think people get hung up when they start to have a physical logistical difficulty with handling their baby and making the milk and making it all look like breastfeeding. That all of that is just made so much harder when all of the other stuff isn't actually addressed. And I don't know any other lactation consultants that are spending time thinking about what are we bringing to the table as whole people, mental health wise, relationship wise, society and community wise. And I think if we start to think about that as being like the practical part of breastfeeding, I think it makes the actual doing of the breastfeeding a little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That community based and the broader perspective just really shifts the conversation. I think that's so essential here.
But I do think because I've leaned so heavily into that, I forget when people say, I want something practical. They want to know what they should put in that little rolly cart next to their nursing stand. And I'm like, I'm not thinking about those things. You're going to figure it out because you're all over the internet and you're going to buy whatever you want to buy. So when I think about practical, I'm not thinking about what pump do you need. I'm thinking about what does your nervous system need?
Mm. Yeah. I love that reframe though. It's like, what does real meaningful support look like? And so often people are thinking about the practical and the building of the physical things, right? Like what cart do I buy? What do I fill it with? What pump do I buy? What breast pads do I buy? And all of that matters. And it's only a piece of the puzzle. It's only a piece of the conversation. So yeah.
So from my perspective, there's two different things that happen simultaneously after someone gives birth. And one is the regular old stuff that happens to everybody. And then there's the stuff that only happens to you. Right? So, and that's kind of everything in life. Like, how am I like all other people and some other people and no other person? There's things that will common. And the frame that I'm going to use to answer that question is the way I think about what therapy is there's a world inside of us, and that's one thing, and then there's the world around us. And how do those two things interact with each other? How do we navigate through the world? How do we change the things in our world? And again, back to the point that everything changes. I change, but part of me is just who I've always been, right? So what do I bring to this table? That was your whole point. And I think that is so lovely that the world has changed. Our world has changed. The rest of the world might not have changed, but the world that we all move through has changed, that we're all acknowledging that these compartments aren't necessary, right? The things that we talk about in terms of psychological and emotional and mental health support probably won't come from a mental health provider. One of the hardest things to do is diagnose, because regular perinatal health looks a lot like when it is distressing, right? Hard to diagnose. Is this just regular what happens because you're tired? Or is this something different that happens when you're tired? And our job in this room today isn't to figure out how to diagnose. We're not here about diagnosis and treatment. We're here about identification, intervention, and then if necessary, referral, right? A woman is sitting with us and she just had a baby, and we're going to listen to her. We're going to listen to all of what she has to say. And she's going to have some real practical questions, because she might really just want to know, what should I buy? because that's what we're taught how to do. I remember seeing a picture of myself right after one of my kids was born. I just had this great big ridiculous smile on my face. I was like, why? And someone said, because someone put a camera in your face. And that's how you respond to a camera in your face. And when we have a baby, there's a whole set of things we're supposed to do that maybe aren't what. If we were animals, we would just be under a tree holding the baby, covering them up so that we could take care of them in the warmth and nobody would be in our face, right? So somewhere between that, we have to live in the world around us. And then we also have the world inside of us. And so what does that kind of support look like? Well, the 4th trimester is really important, but the perinatal period, and the research is just so all over the place on this. Does it start at conception and then it goes 1 year? But no, it starts the first time you think of having a baby, and you might be 8, and it ends never, right?
I love that.
Postpartum is forever. You are forever changed. And the word postpartum, I just want to clarify something. In the old days, the word postpartum meant postpartum depression, and they would say she has postpartum or she has the postpartum. We don't use that phrase anymore, but when I say postpartum, I'm always aware that somebody might think that's what I'm saying. So when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about the perinatal period, which really there might be fertility issues, or there might be earlier loss, or there might be all kinds of things, or there just might be hopes and dreams and imaginations and the fantasy that the world has fed us. That's when it begins. And yes, the 4th trimester does stand uniquely because a lot of the things happen there, right? Perinatal mental health concerns can happen as far as years after, but the first few weeks is where things usually come to a head, if they're going to come to a head. Not always. And I'm not going to talk about statistics, except the one that will blow you away if you don't already know it. Perinatal mental health issues are by far, the single most common complication of pregnancy and childbirth, by a mile. Because no matter which numbers you use, whether it's 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 7, more than half, 85%, these numbers are all over the place in terms of what people experience. Other complications don't come near 20%, 25%, 30%, 50%. Most women, some women, almost all women, right? So the numbers, not important. But everyone we talk to has a story. That story may or may not require professional mental health care, but it does require what we provide, which is mental health care in the context of physical care, in the context of learning all of the things. So that's my answer to that, is that the period itself brings with it a whole list of things. And some of the things on that list require a referral to a professional. Just like when people come to my office, they might need to see a psychiatrist. I'm not that, right? So knowing our scope, knowing our piece of the puzzle, knowing what our job in this thing is, and also staying connected to the other people who do the other things, to me, that's the job. Mm-hmm. Hearing, reacting, and then providing. That's your job too, right? When somebody comes in, what are they telling you they need? Listen to them.
Yeah. I think that I love that. Yes, that is our job, as in those of us on the panel, and that is our job as women moving through this world, right? This is our job as professionals. This is our job as sisters, as aunties, as women. We have this ability to show up and listen. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Hear Her campaign that's going on. That's just the listening campaign of like telling the stories and putting this awareness out into the world. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's amazing. But the idea of really showing up in these spaces and listening, and we each have something we can bring to the table and offer as a connection point. It may not be that we're a professional in the mental health space or in the breastfeeding space or in the physical, the physical therapy or pelvic floor recovery space, but there will be something that we have to offer, whether it be our presence and our listening, whether it be, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm more than happy to help you find it. Like, let's look together. Let's dig into that. Let's reach out to somebody. Just being in these spaces, I think, is so important to remember, because yes, there are absolutely those of us that are doing this work professionally in the field, and we have different resources and additional supports that we can offer to families. But I also just want to name, like, anyone stepping into this space with curiosity about how do I support the fourth trimester can show up in these spaces and do that, can absolutely show up and be that presence to listen, and then research and look for. You don't have to have the answer to show up in the space. You don't have to have all of the resources or connections to show up in the space and support someone. I wish I had known that sooner in my professional career, because I think I tried to be all the things and know all the answers when I first started. And the truth is that so often it is just that presence. It is just that being with someone. And then there's plenty of space and time to go into the looking for the resources and finding the right pieces for that person. There's plenty of time for that. And that timing piece, I think, is especially critical in this fourth trimester, in the postpartum space, because infants are pacing at 6 to 7 times slower than adults. The way that our babies are taking in the world and processing things is happening down here. And postpartum is inviting us to meet our babies in that space of slowing down and taking it in and listening to our bodies and listening to our hearts and breathing, right? And when we are going, but I need this and I need this and I need this and I got to order that on Amazon and I got to figure this out and who's going to walk the dog and who's going to make the dinner and we are not meeting our babies in that space.
Yeah.
We're not accepting the invitation to meet ourselves in that space. And I think that when we show up in that space to support someone else and can model that presence in that calm pacing and just model that piece of, like, I am here. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to rush around and do all the things. I can just sit with you and listen and be present. We start to actually hear what's going on underneath. Jen, I think that is very much part of your practice when someone arrives in your office. I have seen time and time again where the first thing is like, sit down, settle in, let's have a cup of tea. Do you need a snack? Whereas most practitioners, when you get to their office, it's like, okay, we got 15 minutes, let's go. First and foremost, you are meeting someone where they are. Sit down, settle in. We have plenty of time to discuss this. And the truth is that you are still limited by time constraints, right. but someone doesn't feel that as the first thing. And I very much try in postpartum support, when I walk into someone's house, the first thing is not like, okay, this is how much time we got on the clock. What are we going to do? The first thing is like, let's sit down on the couch and talk about how the last 24 hours has gone. What is it that you need? How can I support you? Like, let's just sit down and connect first and foremost. And Jean Marie, I'm sure, again, you have the time constraint of, yes, they have a certain amount of time in a visit with you. And yet that sitting down, grounding, landing, being present is absolutely the first and most important piece. Do either of you have anything that's kind of coming up for you? I'm talking a lot, so.
Everything that comes out is beautiful and amazing. And it's almost like we all got together before this to make sure we were all speaking about the same thing, because everything we're all talking about is so beautifully interrelated and interwoven. The expression where they say babies are our best teachers, right? That was coming up for me when you were sharing how babies pace so much slower and give us an opportunity to to slow down that external noise and to be able to quiet ourselves and to be able to listen. I'm also realizing something that I learned as a birth doula many, many years ago is that a pregnant woman is walking around in a alpha brainwave state versus the standard population is in beta, I believe I have it correct. And when she goes into labor, she drops down into delta. And so these brainwave states, as we drop down into delta, our brain slows down. And that's why like labor land feels like a very different kind of timeline. Time feels very ethereal, and it can feel really long and very short at the same time. And I'm wondering if in beautiful design, if babies pacing so much slower is medicine for us to keep us in that space so that we aren't leaving who we were in that birthing room and coming into postpartum in that very frenetic, like all over the place, I need this, I need this. And babies are almost there to remind us, don't leave yourself there in labor. Don't leave that part of you that instinctually and innately knew how to slow down time. Don't leave her in the hospital. Don't leave her in the birth. Bring her with you into postpartum. Babies are really beautiful medicine for that, for pacing us if we know it so that we can respond to it. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to get a little clinical and didactic for just a minute.
Please.
When we're talking about mental health, which I'm always doing, no matter what I'm talking about, there's regular, and then there's need some extra assistance, and they're like typical is a word that we use, regular is the word that we use. There's all kinds of research, what puts people at risk, and if we can recognize the risk, then we can prevent mental health. So the first thing I want to say is we cannot prevent anything. What we can do is reduce the risks, mitigate what might happen, provide more support for if it does happen, lower the chances that it will happen, whatever that thing is. Whether the thing is a C-section, whether that thing is the baby doesn't make it and we have a really sad outcome, whether that thing is breastfeeding, right? We put in our minds, because we have so many tools, that if we just use all these tools and we use them right, everything's going to be perfect. And the bottom line is that's not the story. The story is our job as humans, but as professionals in the field, is to be aware of all of these things and put the things in place ahead of time, right? So I do a lot of prenatal mental health work with people who have risk factors that they're aware of, either an already existing mental health diagnosis or prior history of perinatal mental health diagnosis, or their mother had whatever. And they just want to put some tools in place. We can do all of those things, and it still might come out that the person ends up in a really dark place, right? So our job is to listen. And I know I keep saying that, but that's really all there is. And there's some research on this. So there's lots of quantitative research. I've already talked about this. There's one piece of literature. I'm going to put the article out on the thing. You should all read this article. They just interviewed women. It's how qualitative work works. They interview people, and then they pull out what they say and they write it down. And the idea that these women are something special or different or amazing compared to all of the other special and amazing and wonderful women who we meet, they just were part of a study. Just like if someone writes a book, they just have a publicist. Everyone you sit with has a story. But I'm going to actually going to look down and read to you this quote because it's so worth hearing. In this research, they asked 1 million questions, and they came up with 4 themes that were common to everyone that they interviewed. The first one was feeling like a bad mom. That was common to almost everybody, feeling like a bad mom. One was silencing negative feelings. Mm-hmm. Both a belief that we have to silence our negative feelings and the action of silencing our negative feelings. The next two have to do with kind of hopeful things. Common was coming to terms with my new self, my new body, my new self, my new identity. The last one is the one that's most relevant to us here today. Finding solace in shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
Being with other moms, being someone who's listening, finding solace. And this quote comes from someone who was talking about that. And she's talking about doctors, but she's also talking about you, every single one of you, and about me. I was lucky to fall on compassionate doctors, medical professionals who helped me, listened to me, who understood me, who didn't pathologize, overdiagnose, or overmedicate, who got the full story assessed, who were there to support me, and most important, to give me accurate, reliable, recent research information. That was a godsend. Now, I could have said that, you could have said that, anyone could have said that. She happened to say it in a room where somebody was writing things down.
Mm.
But the single most important thing that we can do is see the people sitting in front of us and hear the people sitting in front of us. Sure, I have a list of all the things we have to look for, and it's going to be up on the website. I don't think we're going to get to it, but what are the things that stand out that might require a referral? But you don't get to those things unless you look at someone, listen to them, see them, ask the question, answer. Whether it is a typical response or an atypical response that needs something else. And that is the part of the system we can impact. And when it comes to a change, the change that we're hoping that we will all make in this room, that's what awareness programs are all about. Helping people to come place and there's three pieces of that. Jen, you alluded to this before. One is what we know. What do we know? That's information. That's part of any awareness campaign. One is, what do we do? What are the skills that we need, and what are we supposed to do, and how do we do it? And then the third one that comes in the middle is what the research calls attitudes. So these are knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors, right? Or what we think, what we feel, what we do. Or heart, head, hand. But the one in the middle is the most important one when it comes to actually changing, because that involves motivation. That involves a sense of self-efficacy. That involves a belief. And this is not, I'm not talking about the moms now, I'm talking about the people who are in this room. Belief that what you do matters, can make a difference. Talking to you, regardless of what you bring into that room. You could be a grandmother and you bring it into the room. You could be a psychiatrist and you bring it into the room. But the belief that you'll make a difference, because in the research, the single best predictor of whether or not we do things is whether we think it'll work. That's just the single best predictor in all the things. What are we going to do? Are we going to get a new job or everything? Are we going to quit smoking? Is it going to work? Are we going to talk to someone about something? We think it'll make a difference. So my appeal to you is, sure, there's the literature and there's the research, and that'll all be there for you to read. And maybe we'll do another one of these and we'll talk specifically about identification and referral and intervention and all of that. But for the most part, you are the difference when you're the person in the room. That's it, because it's you. And if that feels like pressure, it's not. It's opportunity and lovely. It is really lovely. And that's why you do this work. That's why you're here in this room. You would pick something else to do. Right. So that's the thing that I have to say about that. Is knowledge, attitude, behavior. The piece that is the most important is believing all the things we're learning and actually then doing. That's the action part. And having the knowledge, right? We have to know what we're doing. We have to be competent, all of those things, but mostly believing.
Yeah.
In my biased opinion.
Well, I agree. In my biased opinion, I agree. Thank you so much. And yes, to Jean Marie's point, we could talk for days about all of this, and I want to be very respectful of everyone's time. And thank you all for joining us today. So we are going to wrap it up. There are resources that will be shared along with the recording, and I just want to highlight once again this concept of it really is not one single way of doing this. There is no right way. There is no one way to enter or move through these life transitions. It really is about showing up and being present, being part of the conversation, and then connecting with the web of support that is available that feels most appropriate for what is going on. So please reach out if you feel like there is someone in your life, whether you're a professional or a parent, if there's someone in your life where it's yourself who is really feeling like I need to connect to that web and I don't know how, please reach out. We absolutely have resources and the evidence-based information to be able to give you and support you so that you can further that journey, further take the next step, get the support you need. And thank you again for being part of the conversation. Thank you, Jean Marie and Jen, for showing up and sharing.
Thank you.
Are there any PSs that Jen or Jean Marie that either of you have before we leave today?
No.
Sometimes saying less is more.
Right. And just reiterate, we are all on the team together. So our contact will also be there. And I am so reachable that if someone says they couldn't reach me, I don't think they're even telling the truth.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for joining us today. We hope you have a beautiful weekend and that everyone stays safe and warm during the incoming snow. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thank